Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. We have an invocation. Please come on up to the podium. Welcome, Ms. Gratz.
Thank you. Do I face this way or?
Just face the microphone so we can all hear you.
Okay. Loving God, inspire us this evening with the qualities of good leadership. Give us insight to make wise decisions, integrity to face the truth, courage to make difficult choices, and compassion for the needs of others. Make us a model of justice and honor to the community, and let us never forget that our job is to serve both you and others. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Ms. Gratz from Church of the Ascension. Roll call, please, Bev.
Mayor Schlum,
Here.
Councilmember Dickey,
Here.
Vice Mayor Archambault,
Here.
Councilmember Hanson,
Go Falcons!
Councilmember Brown,
All right. Here.
Councilmember Leger,
Here.
Councilmember Contino.
Here. All right. Speaking of Councilmember Contino, don't you have something to tell us? You have a little birthday coming up on October 5th. So, well, that's why I had to go up and get all the answers. You see, our town clerk puts all the answers in the agenda just before, no, not all the answers. She guides us through our meeting with this. But she let me know that your birthday's coming up on October 5th. So I want to wish you a happy birthday. Thank you. This coming week. Next item on the mayor's report is rotation of the vice mayor position to Councilmember Cassie Hanson. And this is pursuant to our town code. Each member of the council, except for the mayor, shall serve an 8-month term as vice mayor and shall perform the duties of mayor during his absence or disability. So, Vice Mayor Archambault, for the last time, at least this rotation.
I'm going to relinquish my...
Well, thank you for serving. You did a great job. Really appreciate it.
Do I get to keep this?
I don't know.
Probably not.
And Councilmember Hanson.
Oh, wow.
Da-da-da.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Now,
I'm
Mike,
sure you'll do an awesome job.
So well.
Oh, the responsibilities are so
job.
many. Push it forward. There you go.
Now. Oh, sure. Show off.
Further up. Yeah, a little down here on the ledge.
Okay.
There you go. A little down. This is the first test.
I'm 14.
No, you're not.
All right.
All right, thanks. Councilmember Hanson, you're doing an awesome job. Appreciate it. Got some proclamations here. The first one I'm going to read is, which one is this one? National Customer Service Week. So, whereas the Senate Joint Resolution 166, the United States Congress has designated the week of October 1 through October 9 as National Customer Service Week and requested that the President issue a proclamation of observance this week, and whereas the various federal, state, and local government officials throughout the country are taking this time to recognize, thank, and commend all customer service personnel for the dedicated service they provide to citizens, and whereas the Town Council would like to express its sincere thanks and appreciation for outstanding service provided to the citizens of the town of Fountain Hills on a daily basis by the customer service representatives of the town, and whereas the Town Council recognizes and commends the customer service representatives for fulfilling the town's commitment to providing the highest and most efficient level of customer service, therefore I, J.T. Schlum, Mayor of the town of Fountain Hills, hereby proclaim the week of October 1 through October 9 as Customer Service Week in Fountain Hills and respectfully ask all citizens to join us in expressing our thanks for the outstanding work performed by the customer service representatives of the town of Fountain Hills throughout the year. In witness thereof, I hereto set my hand and cause to be affixed the seal of the great town of Fountain Hills. So we'll look forward to the ongoing awesome customer service by our customer service representatives here at the town, and we appreciate your service. The next proclamation is, I've got a couple to juggle here, so I'll make sure. Yep, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Whereas homes should be a place of warmth, unconditional love, tranquility, and security, and whereas for most of us, home and family can indeed be counted among our greatest blessings, and whereas tragically for many Americans, these are blessings that are tarnished by violence and fear, and whereas women are not the only targets of domestic violence, but young children and the elderly are also counted among the victims, and whereas physical injury and death occurs and emotional scars are often permanent, and whereas law enforcement officials, shelters, hotline services, healthcare providers, and the clergy and concerned citizens are helping in the effort to end domestic violence. And whereas we must recognize the compassion and dedication of these volunteers and professionals, applaud their efforts, and increase public understanding of this important problem. Now, therefore, I, J.T. Schlum, Mayor of the Town of Fountain Hills, do hereby proclaim the month of October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and urge all citizens to observe this month by becoming aware of the tragedy of domestic violence and supporting community efforts in working towards us to its end. Dated this first day of October 2009. And also our Public Safety Advisory Commission has done a great job in helping the community be aware of resources. So I want to thank them for that effort as well. The last proclamation tonight is for McDowell Mountain Month, and it reads, whereas the preservation of McDowell Mountains and the Sonoran Desert has been established as a high priority of the Town of Fountain Hills and its citizens, whereas it is the desire of Town of Fountain Hills to celebrate the unique environment of its preserve, and whereas it is also the intent of the Town of Fountain Hills to raise awareness regarding the need to preserve these valuable treasures for future generations, and whereas the first permanent access trail to the preserve was recently completed that links the McDowell Mountain Regional Park, Dixie Mine Trail to the preserve with northern boundary via the Sonoran Trail, and now therefore I, J.T. Schlum, Mayor of the Town of Fountain Hills, Arizona, do hereby declare the month of October as McDowell Mountain Month in Fountain Hills and call upon all citizens to take a moment during the month to appreciate the beauty of this community treasure. And it is a great trail. I was fortunate enough to be invited by our chair of our McDowell Mountain Preservation Commission, Bill Myers, to check it out, and I was brave enough to answer and go out there, and I survived the hike. And it was it's a beautiful trail out there just beyond the Eagles Nest subdivision trailhead, out through the McDowell Mountain Regional Park and then to our preserve via the new Sonoran Trail, which, again, awesome volunteer efforts to get that done. Now we'll move on to public appearances, presentations. First one is a presentation by a local artist resident here, Judy Yates, of a plan for proposed downtown art fair and farmers market 1 day a week. Welcome, Judy. Need any help getting anything turned up there? Or?
No.
Okay.
I do have some pictures that I will hand to you to look at briefly.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council members. I've been working and talking to the town with a vision that I see that would work wonderful for Fountain Hills. My husband and I spent a lot of time in Santa Fe, and as you all know, it's a huge artist community. One of their strong suits is their local artists, and they have had, in effect there for over 30 years, 17 spots on the plaza where there's a waiting list a mile long for artists to get those spots. They have those spots daily, and it is a 5-year contract. The town was kind enough to give me their 13-page document of their rules and regulations, and I've passed that on to the town staff here. We feel that is way too much for us to start with. So our concept is 1 day a week, starting in October, going through March, where artists would be displaying and working on the avenue, on the medium, is what we would like to see. It would be a very small spot, nothing like a typical artist spot, which is 10 by 14 or 10 by 10. These spots would be 3 by 7. And I do have pictures where they have these same size spots in Santa Fe and beautiful displays where they're able to show their work. We would like to have it from noon to sunset, so this could be a family activity, also for people working. They could come and enjoy it. We'd like to expand on it. Most of you know we had the old farmers market here. That was an idea that I stole from Santa Barbara. I guess I'm real good at borrowing things. But if it works, why fool with it? But if you remember, that started off very strong, and it was a great beginning for a lot of activities. And I'd like to put that together with with the artist market. Over the summer, you may have seen a lot of articles. Farmers markets are very hot right now. And there is a coordinator named Dee Logan, who I had many conversations over the phone with. She's done the Cactus Farmers Market on, actually it's called the Road Runners Market for, I believe, 30 years. In Phoenix on Cactus. She is greatly in demand now, as we found out, not only through the paper, but having a conversation with her. She's now doing a very successful farmers market in downtown Scottsdale. Sky Song just also asked her to come. She's done a new big farmers market that the town is sponsoring also in Glendale that's become very successful. Like I said, she's in great demand. Rick did contact her after I suggested the town do that. And we met with her a couple weeks ago. This is a very serious business for her, and her farmers are already pretty much sold out for this season, so she couldn't even consider coming with us till January or spring, from what I understand. But getting back, that is something we would like to see together. So this is a real attraction for the downtown. My suggestions as far as getting the artists up and running as soon as possible and not waiting for the farmers market to take place because we're starting our busy season. Like I said, I would suggest starting in October, weekly, going through the end of March. We'd like to see it on Thursdays, and the reason why during the week and not a weekend, we're not competing with other art shows. We're giving tourists, residents, snowbirds, something to do during the week. Let's go up to Fountain Hills from Scottsdale, instead of driving all the way to Sedona or Bisbee, do the art walk, which we now have, go see the artists, stay and have lunch, and then take a picture of the fountain. Not come and take a picture of the fountain, get in the car and leave. So that is our intent. We would like to just have artists here that are residents of Fountain Hills, Rio Verde, Tonto Verde, and Rick suggested, which I thought was brilliant, Fort McDowell artists. And also grandfather in the artists. We have 40 artists in the gallery on the Avenue, and a lot of them are not residents. We like to grandfather those artists into the event also. All the artists would have to be juried. Like I said, this program has been in effect in Santa Fe for 30 years. I spoke to Jenna, who runs this program, and asked, are there any issues with the retailers? They do many, many art shows there. She says, no, we feel it's an attraction. We love it. It brings people to our plaza, and the retailers have no problem. They actually really feel it is a strong suit. I would suggest only market umbrellas, no tents. We don't want it looking like it's overwhelming. We would like it to look very first class, like we used to have artists on the Riviera drawing and painting, and make it something very special, not your typical art show. Most of these artists that are interested in participating are Art League members. They don't do major art shows. So they are very low-key, not hard sell. They just enjoy what they do, love working with their supplies on site and talking to the public. Our mission is to make this a weekly event, to include the farmers market, children's events, invite like local bands. I had the jazz band down here when we had the old farmers market, and make it a real family event, endless opportunities. And to end this up, I would like to say this vision would show an accomplishment of the Swyback Visioning Plan, in my opinion, to show a more vibrant downtown that is walkable and appealing to all ages. It would create an opportunity for downtown businesses to piggyback on the activity and to reach out to their customers in special ways. We also would like to invite the chefs from our local restaurants, where they could do demonstrations, take food from the farmers market, and do weekly demonstrations. We'd love to see the local musicians. We have many in this town, one on each end of the avenue, where they're playing music, selling their CDs. This program would be supporting our local artists, which is huge. We have dozens in this community. This would also demonstrate the potential to future developers, that the town is able to rally its arts, its businesses, its community, and the support of the business vitality. I'm not a budget person. I'm an artist, even though I am the treasurer for the gallery. But just sketching out basic budget, I believe $10,000 would be a good start, and this would cover coordination, promotion, printing, and advertising. A coordinator is essential to this project to oversee the artists, the farmers market weekly, and to provide PR. Also coordinating with local businesses and restaurants to create promotions aimed at Market Day. That's just the name I came up with. That's not carved in stone. This should involve the town, the chamber, VVAC, with the communication coordinated by the coordinator. And I do have pictures if you'd like to. These, like I said, are pictures from Santa Fe Market.
Good. We'll pass those down.
I'm open to questions.
Good. Thank you very much, Judy. Rick, anything else you want to cover on this topic?
Mayor, Council, there was, especially with regard to the farmers market, some time ago expressed a desire on the part of the council to see this type of event come into the downtown area. A couple of the areas that we're looking at as possible venues include the area between the library and town hall, and also perhaps utilizing part of our parking lot might be a possibility as well, particularly as such is close to or aligns with Avenue of the Fountain. The idea is that the farmers market would synergize with the artists' displays, and then also you bring in the performing artists element, and we've even thought of incorporating art walk and perhaps even some taste of the town type of thing, or opportunities for restaurants to kind of demonstrate some of their foods too. So it's quite an entire arts experience, not just the visual arts, culinary, performing, etc. in there. Beyond that, talking to Captain Kleinheinz, there is a possibility that we wouldn't have to close any roads. That would greatly facilitate this. Obviously, there are restrooms available along the avenue as well. That was a concern. We don't want to have to bring out the porta potties every week as well. Some of the things, those are all the things going for this proposal. Some of the things that might complicate it, obviously the resources are extremely scarce, especially in the middle of a budget year, as such pertains to dedication of a staff person or the coordination by the town. There perhaps a volunteer might be able to, we might be able to acquire some volunteer help. And as far as the actual monetary contribution to that, we have not identified a funding source for that as well. So those are the two hurdles and some of the pluses and minuses.
All right, I know the first thing you mentioned is where it would be, and that was you mentioned the community center, a parking lot or something. That was the first thing that came to mind was our joint meeting with the senior services about their number one challenge is parking.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Thursday is a day that
Not in the parking lot, but yeah.
If an evening is a busy time, but obviously there's places you would have to address traffic
sure.
or parking.
Sure.
To make sure it's not infringing on other folks'
Yeah.
use. But I think it is, I'll open up to other council members. Any questions or comments on what Ms. Yates has presented? Council member Archambault.
You have to think about that now, don't you? Thank you, Mayor. Judy, it's a wonderful idea. I was curious as you were describing it. I was thinking of the boardwalk along Newport Beach. Is that the type of atmosphere you're trying to create?
Venice Beach. I mean, there's many.
Oh, yeah.
Santa Barbara. We were just in Santa Barbara. It's all along there. I mean, and it's every Sunday. in Santa Barbara. I know it is in Venice Beach a certain night.
Well, I certainly commend you for thinking outside the box. This is a really neat idea. I think it could be something to get pulled off and hopefully encourage the success of this thing. So,
Thank you.
thank you for bringing it forward.
Any other? Councilmember Brown?
I agree, that's a great idea. My question is, why would we limit it to local and grandfathered artists only? Would you not want to put a, why wouldn't we want to put a total number of X, 20 or 40 artists? And if the locals and the grandfathers couldn't, then we could go ahead and fill the venue with artists from Fort McDowell or Scottsdale or and maybe have a list of people as Santa Fe does to fill up the stalls.
Santa Fe does limit it only to Santa Fe residents. That's really where I got it. And because we are a huge artist community, and we have just brought into our gallery many artists from Tonto Verde and Rio Verde, and they're fabulous, full of energy. So we would also like them to join us. But this is just all my suggestions. We're open.
Well, they're great suggestions.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are definitely some things to work out. Councilmember Hanson. Or Vice Mayor Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry about
Judy, would,
Yeah.
we had the discussion about location way back when Kate was working on this. And I know Paul Norton Parkway was discussed and the community center courtyard was discussed. But I thought we were leaning more towards keeping it down by the avenue and close to the businesses that are really, we're looking to try and help and generate foot traffic for them as well. About cost, would the artists pay, is there a minimal cost or something for their
Very
spaces?
minimal. I mean, in Santa Fe, they charge $400 for the year, and that's every day. It's minimal. Again, these artists are not your typical artists where, you know, I pay $450 for a great show. These are more hobbyists, more retired people that love what they do, and they just will not put out that kind of money. They were paying behind Plaza Fountainside, I believe, maybe $5, and that really went strictly towards advertising. So, you know, they're used to paying nothing. You know, they show at the community center. And I have to be totally honest with you, too. As I'm sure you can understand, art is not on the priority in this economic environment. To my opinion, the artists are more of an asset to this town than you would be to the artists at this point in time. They love what they do, and yes, my theory is to have it on the avenue to create foot traffic. And really where this started brainstorming, because I was involved in the vision with Wyback, which is wonderful. We have something in place now. But what can we do immediately to help our town, to bring people here, to want to come here, to get excited about coming here? I mean, what more? To me, this is a no-brainer. Yes, it's going to cost money. Yes, there's things we have to learn along the way, and we're only going to learn them till we do them. So,
Do you have a number of spaces, if I can I just go ahead? A number of spaces for artists and for farmers market? Is there kind of any, just some numbers out there?
to make a good showing, I recommend 24 to 30 artists every week. And I've already spoken to the Art League and the gallery. A lot of these people are not even willing to commit one day a week. I mean, this is how much this is. So what we have worked out, like Art League would take 4 spots every week. And it would be their responsibility to fill those 4 spots every week. They would be on a rotation. The same with the gallery. I mean, I did 26 shows a year. I was a committed professional artist. These people, most of them, like I said, love what they do and like to show it, but they're not committed to once a week even at this point.
When people participate in the farmers market, do they generally pay just as a small space
I think so.
fee?
The promoter does collect money, from what I understand, yes.
I mean, because
And what that fee is, I do not know.
I was just playing with numbers today, and I thought if we had 20 artists and 20 farmers market people, and, you know, at $10 a space, that would more than cover the $10,000, and it would be coming just from the
That's exactly
a minimal
right.
cost.
I mean, even if they paid $5, and there was that's $100 a week. that's paying for really your coordinator, because out of $10,000, it's about $250 a week for the coordinator. I figured $5,000, $1,000 per month. So that would pay almost for half your coordinator. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things we could be creative with.
Well, and I was wondering if, because with Parks and Rec programs, I think they still contract with individuals to run certain programs. And I kind of thought this might be similar to that, where, you know, the town would say, okay, we're going to contract with, you know, whoever the coordinator might be to run this for 6 months out of the year. It would be a seasonal thing, but, I mean, I think it would work right into something we're already doing.
I think it's something that we would find our way through. May not pick the best location at first, but we could work with it. But I think your idea is great. I think it does fit into the vibrancy initially. Certainly get something going relatively quickly. I can understand the farmers market not being ready because I think they plan on crops and all those
Correct.
types of things in advance. But getting that going would be, I think the community loved that farmers market and did help the businesses down there by bringing people closer to them or make them aware of it. Councilmember Leger, did you have something?
Yes.
Oh, you're moving the microphone there. Okay.
That's your cue, I guess. Judy, thanks for the presentation. Very nice. Appreciate it. And I'll defer to you as the expert because you did recommend Thursday. And that was a question I was going to ask. Have you ever considered Saturday? And the reason I go there is I recall previous farmers markets and things of that nature on the avenue, whereas a lot of the working folks, the younger population that we're trying to tap, they miss out on those opportunities. And I had an opportunity this summer to travel a bit, and I was in a couple of really neat places. And the farmers markets they had on Saturday mornings were just awesome and very well attended by, you know, working class folks, people that have full-time jobs, so forth and so on. I understand the notion of competition and trying to get people up here during the week. I guess time will tell. My sense is we may generate larger numbers on a Saturday. Any thoughts there?
Well, you have a good point. There are quite a few farmers market on Saturday. I know Prescott has one and many areas. I guess originally when I first brought it here 5 or 6 years ago, I took that idea from Santa Barbara.
Sure.
They have closed down their streets, I think 4 or 5 streets, Main Street. And you've been there, Jay?
No.
Huge, huge. Flowers and meats, and it is a family event.
Sure.
And it's during the week. So many people, Saturday, young families, I know our daughter has the soccer and the baseball, and Saturdays are jam-packed. Also, as bringing the farmers market with the artists, we don't want to compete with all the art shows. I know during season, there's 3 to 4 art shows per weekend.
Okay.
And we just don't want to compete with that.
Sure.
And I feel that if we could bring in to the farmers market more family activities, that's what we need. Obviously, they come to it. I looked at Oktoberfest, saw all the families down there. I feel they're looking for things to do, these families. I know when I brought the jazz band in from the middle school for the farmers market 4 years ago, those parents had never been on the avenue. I mean, it was amazing to me. So if we can have, I know personally as a retailer, I'm hit up constantly for donations, and I know they need them, but why can't we bring those booster clubs and things like that to the farmers market so they can maybe once a week, one of those groups gets to come down and do a raffle or something to that nature. So we can really, I mean, there's so many things we could build on that.
Absolutely. Well,
So to answer your question, I like the midweek.
obviously, and I'll defer to your expertise, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you for your presentation.
Councilmember Contino.
Thank you, Mayor. I thank you for your presentation tonight, Judy. I think the thing that I really enjoyed was Thursday night was that when you had it at the end, you had more cars that stopped and looked to see what was happening, and your traffic picked up where you had hardly any spaces to park anymore. And I think that people will come down. They do love a farmer's market, and with the art show added into that, it'll just bring more and more people down, and it will start to grow week after week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Leger, one more thing?
One last question. I'll defer to the town manager. I know, Rick, you've been involved in this. What do you see as the next step?
Our next step would probably be to further assess the elements that we're going to need to acquire or put into action in order to make this a reality. Obviously, the identification of fiscal and human resources to run this. We're still in a holding pattern waiting for Dee Logan to get back to us, as well as to whether they're going to further consider our town for the farmers market. As far as the regulatory component associated with the arts part of this, I think Julie can probably talk to you in a little bit more detail about the regulatory hurdles and elements that are part of that. And those also have to be addressed. And a lot of things we can probably work with quite well, and other things we can't get over. We'll have to do those things. As far as the presence of physical infrastructure that support this kind of event, I think the Avenue has it. That's my assessment. This is all very feasible as long as we do three things. One, identify the human resources necessary to coordinate and keep the event running, whether that's volunteers, artists, merchants, or staff. Number two, identify the fiscal resources that are going to be needed. And number three, hurdle the regulatory elements, or satisfy them is a better word. And I think our next step, if the council would like us to move forward on this, there's a consensus here, and this is why we wanted to have Judy come and present this, is to get together and start addressing all three of those elements and come back with another plan for you, so you're aware of how we're going to move forward with this. But obviously, we're enthusiastic about it. We just haven't answered all the questions yet.
Thank you, Rick. Councilmember Hanson? Or Vice Mayor Hanson?
Thank you, Mayor. Julie did send us an email, and it addressed the temporary use permit. And I know as I was scrolling down my screen, and it was like, okay, number 5, number 6, and it was like, okay, where's the end of all these things and hoops that you have to jump through for a temporary use permit? And when I got to the bottom, I thought, I would just say, forget it. And I can't help but think that the temporary use permit was maybe meant for a more intense use. And what we're dealing with here, this market concept, is maybe something that we want to have a whole new procedure, and that we could use this as a model to help come up with that procedure. Kind of have it be a work in progress, where we don't have to say, we're going to spend the next 3 months writing what this procedure is going to be. Instead, let's start implementing it and kind of write the procedure as we go. And I think probably maybe doing the two of them together would be easier to come up with something that's workable, you know, that just won't get so bogged down. Because I'd sure hate to see this just get tied up in a lot of red tape.
And I think that's the intent, is maybe not necessarily make this the bleeding edge of new policy, but to, like other things that have come up in relatively short notice, not that this is short notice, been talking about this one. Other things have come up, the Murphy Mobile, I recall, being something in the short notice right in front of the Art Center. Again, you know, I think staff did a bunch of work quickly to make sure that was all in alignment, the use of the parking space, the public street, and things. But we've talked about that element of doing all we can to stay out of the way of organizations and efforts that bring benefit to our community, to limit the hurdles and the complications similar to what may have preempted the farmers market in the first place. It takes a lot of energy to not just coordinate all the farmers market people, but to work through the towns and cities and that sort of thing. So I think that's where we're hoping to go. Did you want to speak to any of that, Julie, or Rick, on the paperwork and what we might be looking to do or streamline, I guess?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, members of the council. Our goal is really to help facilitate these type of events. It really is a very exciting event and a great vision that was brought forward. The purpose of bringing it to the council and also to talk to Judy was to say, okay, these are the hurdles that we may have to go through. There's a big difference if it's an event that somebody else is putting on versus it's an event that we put on. And because this wasn't something that we had budgeted or planned, we needed to come forward to the council and say, this may be something coming forward if we can somehow fit it in. As Mr. Davis said, we have to find the resources and the ability because it is very labor intensive. There's a lot of work involved with it. So obviously if we run it, the regulations won't apply. So again, the goal is to facilitate it, see what we can do, how we can make it work.
Okay. Anything else, Rick?
No, I think that sums it up, and what we had, we're always enthusiastic to take on a project, and really, at this point, it's not so relevant that we haven't found it yet. We just need to make sure you're okay, and we can go forward and try to develop a plan to address this somehow, and then we'll bring you back in the loop and let you know what we found out. We just don't have a lot of answers right now of how to do it, but we'd like to go forward and look under a couple of areas to see where we can find the resources to do it, if you're willing to let us do that.
Okay, Councilmember Dickey.
Mayor, thank you. That's very exciting, and I know we've been talking about farmers markets and events that go along with us being unique. I just wanted to mention, though, when we start talking about changing ordinances or things like that, that we keep in mind level playing fields, fair playing fields for other events or something that might come up, and also assessments of other events or projects that we take on. I love having all of these activities we've been talking about. We've been looking at our strategic plan and the things that are our goals, just to make sure that we remember to be fair, even playing fields and assessments on all of the things that we endeavor to do.
And as we've talked about before, we're not looking for a flea market, and Judy isn't looking at that either. But there's reasons for regulations. You just have to make sure the intent, you're comfortable, you're protecting your community. Some things are based on scale, like you were saying. If it was a intense, as Councilor Vice Mayor, circus things, you might need further regulations and concerns. But Judy, can't thank you enough. Appreciate it, you sharing it with us tonight, and look forward to seeing that open next week. No.
Get busy.
Soon. Thank you very much.
Mayor, if I may, as we depart this subject, just want to make sure that you're clear that you would like, without having you go through the process of making a motion, that you understand that we're going to go forward then and try to investigate some means and resources to answer this particular need.
Yeah, certainly. Volunteer, I think,
Okay.
is ready to help out as well, from what I recall. Not Judy, others. Thank you. Excellent. On to more exciting positive news. We have a presentation from the award received in Belfast, Ireland by the chair of the Fountain Hills Sister Cities organization, Sharon Morgan. Oh, there you are. I thought you had disappeared, Sharon. Welcome, Mayor Morgan. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to have the Mayor come down so I can present this to him. I got it this far from Ireland without scratches. Now, I'm going to turn it over to him, but in looking out in the lobby, you may have to find some money for another display case. I don't see any room for it.
Arts Council.
Or the picture that goes with it. And
What did you receive?
we received, for Sister Cities International, the award for the best overall projects for towns of population under 25,000. This was internationally. I don't know who the judges were, but I thank them. We submitted it to Washington, D.C., and about 2 months later, I received a letter of congratulations, and then it was my honor to attend the international conference in Belfast, Ireland, along with 2 other board members, to accept the award. And I have also, in addition to the trophy, have for the town the official picture of us being presented with that award from the Executive Director of Sister Cities International and the Chairman of the Board of Directors of Sister Cities International. It was an exciting breakfast. And I've also brought along, and the mayor has one, and Bev has them for the other council, or if they've not passed them out, the program. And you can see we were in good company. Bono was the overall winner for his humanitarian efforts. Chicago, Birmingham, all kinds of cities. And then along comes little old Fountain Hills, less than 25,000. And here we are, folks. This was for our efforts of 2008 for what we have accomplished with Sister Cities. So I am very proud to present it to you on behalf of Sister Cities, which is the town.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate all the efforts of the volunteers, part of Sister Cities International here in Fountain Hills, and receive this award proudly. It's amazing. Best overall program in the whole world.
That's right.
Right here in Fountain Hills for communities under 25,000. Of course, we're growing, so we'll have to move into another category soon. Have to win that one.
Well, yeah, and then we have to compete with Tempe.
Yeah, then we get up to 100,000. But it says here, Fountain Hills' first Sister City relationship was signed in Casterly, Belgium in 1990, and since we partnered with Deerdorf, Germany, and Ataco, El Salvador in 2008, and we've done youth exchanges, and of course, the community's been extremely generous in taking care of many needs down in Ataco, El Salvador, and the relationships will just continue to grow because of the efforts of the volunteers that run the Sister Cities effort here in Fountain Hills, and this is just amazing. And you went all the way with the additional volunteers to
Yes.
Northern Ireland to receive it, which had to
Right.
be very exciting. So thank
It
you for
was.
sharing this with us and all the efforts that make our community a richer place to live.
And thank the town for helping us do what we do through Sister Cities.
You bet. Thanks, Mayor Morgan.
Thank you.
You bet.
I don't know how Bob does this.
You teach him everything he knows, Mike?
Put this by your black shirt, I'll stand that. Thanks, Mike. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to carry it because I've known to.
That could hurt.
Okay.
All right, now on to call to the public. Anyone wish to speak, Beth?
No, Mayor, no speaker.
All right, thank you. Move to the consent agenda. Request a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed.
So moved?
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cantino?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Henson?
Aye.
Councilmember Leger?
Aye.
Councilmember Dickey?
Aye.
Mayor Schlum?
Aye.
Councilmember Brown?
Aye.
Councilmember Ashambo?
Aye.
Mayor 7-0.
All right, thank you. Move on to our regular agenda now. The first item is number 5, consideration of appointing 3 citizens to serve a 2-year term from October 1 through September 30th, 2011, and appointing 1 citizen to serve a 1-year term from October 1 through September 30th, 2010 on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I move to appoint, or actually reappoint, Lloyd Pugh, reappoint Cecil Yates, and newly appoint Jeff Mangles to serve a 2-year term, and newly appoint Gary Goodell to serve a 1-year term on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor 7-0.
Thank you. And item number 6 on the regular agenda is consideration of appointing 1 citizen to serve on the Public Safety Advisory Commission from October 1 through October 31st, 2011. And for that spot, I move to appoint new Commissioner Lyle Edwards to serve a 2-year term. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor 7-0.
All right, thank you very much. And let's see here. The next items, item number 7, Amber 8. I spoke with the applicant, and I did see an email from staff that they're aware that this item has been requested to be taken off tonight's agenda and to be placed on a further agenda date. Is that correct? Correct? All right.
Yes.
So if that's all right with council, we'll do that. I spoke with the applicant today just to make sure he was ready to go, and got a couple more things to work on before he wants us to come forward. So the applicant has asked that this be taken off tonight. Do we need to do anything officially other than mention that? Okay. All right, next item. Item number 9 on our agenda is consideration of ordinance 09-09, amending the Fountain Hills Town Code, Article 7-10, relating to adjustments to development fees for the town of Fountain Hills. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. During our last meeting in September, the council had requests for other pieces of information on the proposed development fees. So I prepared a brief presentation of some of those items, and also we have Pat Walker from Red Oak here to answer any questions that the council may have.
All right.
A brief timetable of how this process started. Back in September of 2008, at a work study session, the council received the capital improvement plan, infrastructure improvement plan, which we call the CIP-IIP. And then on April 23rd, we published the notice of intent and held a public hearing on the proposed plan. We published that notice in the Times on May 6th and May 13th. The report, the draft report, was presented to the council on May the 7th. We held a public hearing again on July the 2nd, and we discussed the proposed fees in August and discussed them again in September, and we're discussing them again this evening. If the fees are adopted, or if there is a change to the existing fees, they would not become effective until July 1st, 2011 because of the legislative moratorium.
Wait, can I ask a question about that?
Councilmember Dickey?
The last thing, thank you, Mayor. The date thing, earliest effective date, it's technically 75 days from when we would adopt them. Can we get that in there somewhere? Because that looks pretty definitive.
Mr. Mayor, council member, the date that's in the ordinance is actually an either or. It's a earlier to occur of the moratorium being lifted, or the July 1st, 2011, so that if in the interim period it's lifted, but nothing will change the 75-day effective period. So that the ordinance will become effective 75 days from now, but the fees won't be implemented until either of those 2 days, whichever happens first.
Thank you.
Mayor and Councilor, should mention also that if there is a decrease in any of the fees, they will go into effect within the 75 days because the moratorium just applies to increases. The proposed fee schedule for residential is an increase from $5,472 to $10,459. Non-residential fee increases, broken down, the total commercial current fee is $3.21. The proposed fee is $9.37. Industrial from $1.98 to $3.12. This is a chart of a comparison on our residential fees, the bottom arrow being where the town of Fountain Hills is now, and the top arrow is where the town of Fountain Hills would be if the proposed residential fees were adopted. The next 3 charts are, I handed out at the beginning of the meeting, there was a calculation error in the formula, so the charts that are in your PowerPoint are not correct. The ones that I handed out and the ones that are up on the screen are correct. So based on the current fee schedule for a 25,000 square foot commercial building, the town of Fountain Hills, you can see, is the 3rd one from the bottom with the existing fee structure. The proposed fees, we would be the 4th down from the top. This next chart is a commercial building, again, at $100,000 square feet. Since commercial fees are based on a square footage basis, not a unit basis, these fees depending on the size of the project. The Fountain Hills current rate is at $3.21, the 3rd one from the bottom. The proposed fees would be the 2nd one from the top. and this is the industrial fee. The current one would be currently the second one from the bottom, and if these were adopted, they would be the fifth one from the top. This is a comparison of the commercial. This is the non-residential fees. And again, this is a per square foot fee compared to other cities and towns. And a lot of cities and towns have adopted different rates for different sizes of buildings. For example, Queen Creek, for a building that's less than 25,000 square feet, the rate is $10.99 per square foot. If it's less than 50,000, it's $8.80, and so on. I won't read all these. If the council has any questions on these square footage fees, I'd be happy to answer what we have up here. Again, Gilbert has office category, they call office non-residential, of $1.29. They have a retail category, $2.85. Avondale has $9.50 for less than 25,000 square feet. Apache Junction has $20.76 for less than 25,000 square feet. And then Carefree and Buckeye. This is an example. During the last meeting, a resident spoke about the development fees that were paid to the town when they built their building. And so for illustrative purposes, this is the example of those two projects that were mentioned. The first one was Pal's Inn. They paid development fees in 2006, which is 2 fees ago, and they paid $27,000, or they would have paid $27,212 under the new fee schedule on the same square footage. They would pay $76,753. And the other office that was, I think you said it was on Parkview, it was one project, but it was into 3 office buildings, and they paid $2,545. Under the new fee schedule, they would pay $5,666, and so forth. The revenues, a request was asked of what the revenues would be through the study period, and this is through build-out. These are the proposed, if the proposed fees were adopted, this is what the revenues we would receive, including interest, over through 2031, for a total of $64.9 million. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And again, Pat Walker is here from Red Oak, and we're happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
All right, thank you. Bev, do we have anyone from the public?
Yes, Mayor, we have one speaker, Ed Key.
Mr. Key? Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for having me. Mayor Sloan and members of the council, my name is Ed Key, and I live on Agate Knoll and Fountain Hills. Growth, particularly residential growth, does not pay for itself. It makes increased demands on infrastructure. Without development fees, capital costs due to growth, without development fees to defray capital costs due to growth, municipalities like ours will find their financial stability undermined and the cost of growth borne by existing citizens. Our current fees are inadequate. They were arbitrarily set by the 2004-2006 Council and not based upon objective measurements. The Council tonight is called upon to make a similar decision on a recommendation by Red Oak Consulting that would equate to the actual cost of growth. Likely growth-related cost items are management and widening of major arteries, a new fire station in the north, additional land for parks, expansion of our library and community center, and the installation of traffic control measures at warranted intersections. As with the last adjustment, stories abound that increasing the fees will stall economic development generally, and the downtown vision in particular. This is simply not true. There is no evidence that development fees play any part in or have a negative effect on economic development. Following the logic of the well-intentioned opposition, one would think that Fountain Hills' historically low fees would have been the incentive over the years to develop downtown, but the 13 acres remain vacant. Families decide to locate in Fountain Hills because of its natural beauty, small-town atmosphere, and low crime rate. Commerce and industry base their decisions on the objective measurement of the market in terms of area population. I propose that when we reach 30,000, they will come. We're on the cusp of 1,800 new single-family homes in the mountain properties, the former state trust land, and infill lots. An adjustment of $5,000 per lot will not deter those who can afford the expected $675,000 to $1.5 million home purchase prices. Using the proposed new rates, the commercial development fee as a percent of building cost is estimated to be 5.4%, while the industrial fee, again as a percent of building cost, will be in the range of 2.5%.
You have a few more minutes, another minute, Mr. Key.
These rates are objectively determined by accepted practices and contain net growth costs within projected revenue. Our 20-year capital improvement plan approved by this council calls for $60 million in projects directly attributable to growth, while the total development fees under the proposed adjustment are estimated at $64.9 million, including interest. It has been suggested that we waive the fees for infill lots since they, quote, already paid their taxes to build the frontage street. I would remind you that there are 7 fee areas and impact occurs when the families move in. Swayback Partners has called for a public-private partnership to accomplish the downtown vision, a process of give and take. There may be parts of that division that can be attributed to growth. Development fees give us something with which to bargain. Of course, we have the option of ignoring the cost of growth to the community and rejecting the fee proposal entirely, turning our backs on money which would fund growth. As a result, quality of service diminishes, quality of life suffers, property values decline, and the exodus begins. This is certainly one of the truly significant decisions you will be asked to make during your tenure. Consider what is best for the wider community of 25,000 constituents and vote to approve the fees recommended by your consultant. If you fail to get it right, current residents will pay the piper down the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Key. Anyone else? All right, Councilmember, any questions for staff or any questions for staff? I guess we'll go forward with questions for staff there initially. Councilmember Dickey?
Mayor, thank you. And this might be for Red Oak too. When we look at the comparisons with the cities, we do the non-utility development fees. And I understand that because we're, we don't have the same sanitary district and the water company and that kind of thing. There was an article in the paper about development fees, and it was called Cities Blast Impact Fee Freeze. And it has a lot of things that would help bolster what I'd like to say, but I won't go with that, except one thing that struck me was that Gilbert's impact fees are $19,726. So that is because obviously they have water and such. But the argument that we're kind of having, which has to do with who's going to go where, when, and they won't come here because ours are $10,000 kind of thing, sort of pales when you see that. So that kind of comparison hasn't actually been done. But in the meantime, we, the ones who've lived here all this time, have been paying sanitary fees, and the sanitary district, which would be prepared to absorb these new homes or the water that we paid or allotted us. So I guess I want to know, that's a big jump. I mean, that's a lot more than all of our property taxes, and we don't even pay property taxes here in Fountain Hills. So I'm just kind of asking about those comparison charts, because a lot's been being made of those, despite the fact that that's actually a moving target too, because a lot of these other cities are looking to raise them. So that's something that I'd like to hear. That's a big difference, $19,726 per house in Gilbert. And on the chart, it's like less than 7, right? So, thanks.
Sure. You want me to go ahead and take that? Mayor and Councilmember Dickey, Red Oak always has a problem with comparisons, and the reason we have a problem with comparisons is a number of reasons. One being that every community is different as far as their service levels and what type of amenities they want to provide to their community. That's the first thing. The other thing is methodology that the different communities may use. And if they use a buy-in or hybrid approach where they look at their current capital assets and look at their population that's existing today and then the future capital projects they're adding, that's going to cause a differential in fees too. So there's a lot of different things that go into that. For one thing, actually, I would say, and this is a perfect example, the town of Gilbert is actually low because they really don't have a street impact fee. They have like a traffic signal fee. So actually, if you would add street impact fee, it would even be higher. So they require their developers to put in the streets, and it's not quantified, but they do pay, to put in the streets. So again, it varies. There's stormwater fees for Mesa that's not included. There's water, wastewater fees, water resource fees, and it's across the board. And you just have to really look at your community, the fees that you're putting in, what you need in order to be able to serve new growth, the service levels that you desire, and that's really what determines the fees.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Councilmember Archambault.
Thank you, Mayor. So what you're telling us is it's really unfair to compare ourselves with other communities because there's such a moving target out there, and each community is unique unto itself. And each community has specific needs. Obviously, I think I would agree with you that we're certainly different than Paradise Valley also, although we often sometimes compare ourselves to Paradise Valley because they're a community approximately our size. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Mayor, council member, that's absolutely true, but we do recognize that councils want to know what those surveys are. I mean, it's always a question that gets asked, but we're always very cautious in reminding council that every community is unique, and you have to look at your own services and your own projects that you want and desire for your community.
We hear a lot, too, about economic development and how impact fees will, or I guess it just seems plausible that it could be true that economic development is driven by impact fees, yet I don't know of anybody that I've asked in the last week of whether they moved here because the impact fees were low or they moved here because they liked the community. The answer I always got was pretty obvious. They moved here because they liked the community. It had nothing to do with impact fees. In fact, Pell's Inn got built because they saw a demand here, not because, I'm going to pay $27,000 in impact fees, and I might have to pay more than that somewhere else. Have you, in your studies, and you guys do this a lot, have you seen any comparison at all with economic development as opposed to impact fees?
Mayor, council member, we've had lots of questions on that. We have not seen a study that has verified that or proven that theory. In fact, in working with a lot of commercial businesses that are coming into a community, one of the things that they state is that that is one of the, probably not one of the determining factors at all in their decisions. There may be other things such as labor pool, the community itself, the amenities, where people can live that work there. Those are ranked higher, and I have seen studies that do that, and the fees kind of rank a little bit below.
What you're describing to me is a business plan. If I'm going to open a business somewhere, I'm going to find out where's my labor pool at, what's the cost of doing business in that particular location, how do I have to set it up, what's the expense of maybe moving in that particular location, all of those things you just brought up that are what I, as a business owner, if I was going to go to another community, would say, where's the data on this information and how do I get it? So, okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions for staff or our Red Oak expert here? Councilmember Leger.
Jill, I have a question on your timetable. I think it's important for me to get my arms wrapped around this, and as well as I believe it's important for the community that may be viewing this evening to get their arms wrapped around it. I've had many comments out there with respect to the numbers and how we derive the numbers as if we throw numbers up against the wall. It's clear from your timetable that this is a well thought out process. We have had a number of meetings, public and otherwise. We've had consultants before us. We've had opportunities for council on several occasions to discuss the situation. We've had numerous people from the public in our previous meeting, and I appreciate their feedback. I've spoken to an awful lot of people outside of council chambers, and the viewpoints are just really all over the board. But going to that slide there, it's my understanding, and obviously it's probably the public's understanding if they've been watching this, that they've learned something that a lot of us didn't know prior to that, that these numbers are driven by our capital improvement plan, our 20-year plan. A plan that this council, with the exception of Councilman Brown, who was not here at the time, approved. Is that correct?
Mayor Slum, yes, that is correct.
Okay, that's Mayor Sloan.
Mayor Slum. Councilman Leger.
The chair.
Members of the council.
Very good. Yes, thank you for correcting me on that. So going back to this chart here, when was the capital improvement plan approved?
There was a work study that was held that dealt specifically in the capital improvement plan, and the infrastructure improvement plan was presented to the council, and was presented to the council that it was going to be the basis for the development fee study that was ongoing at the time. So that was on September 8th.
Okay, so that answers my question. So it was actually on September 8th that of 2008, which was a year ago, that this council deliberated on our capital improvement plan, reviewed that capital improvement plan, gave our thumbs up on it, a plan which is utilized as the baseline for driving the analysis. So the analysis is really based on the predicted future infrastructure needs for our community to maintain our quality of life, to maintain our infrastructure, and to maintain our level of services, which, by the way, is probably the key factor of, I would say, attracting people to our community. I think if we were to look back at probably one of the few scientific studies that was conducted in this town in partnership with the last strategic plan in 2006, the 5 top reasons for moving to Fountain Hills first was views, vista views, the environment, the low cost of, low crime rates, public safety, and things of that nature. And I think the 5th one was quality of housing, appreciating the fact that our contractors build quality products. Fountain Hills is unique, and I would agree it's extremely difficult to look at all these graphs and compare it to other communities. Fountain Hills is a unique place to live, and people will come here because of our quality of life. And I would agree, since we've been having this discussion, I've been unable to find any data that indicates that impact fees is a deterrent to either new housing or economic development or large projects such as the Kasanoff project that we looked at on the Avenue of the Fountains. But what I have found clearly is that places like Fountain Hills grow not as a relationship to impact fees, but it's rather about supply and demand. And we've seen that cycle. I've seen that cycle in the 18 years that I've lived here. So it's just important, and I'll kind of end at this point in time, that for those in the viewing public and those that have called me and those that have emailed me, these numbers are based on a capital improvement plan. A capital improvement plan that is put in place to maintain, sustain the quality of life of our community over the next 20 years. In the absence of sustaining that quality of life and infrastructure, we will have failing infrastructure. And it won't be impact fees that keep residents away. It won't be impact fees that keep developers away. It won't be impact fees that shy people away from the Swaback project. But if the town is not fiscally healthy, and our infrastructure predictably is going to fall by wayside and it's going to deteriorate in our neighborhoods, then we will stop being the desirable community that we are. Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Councilmember Leger. Councilmember Dickey?
Mayor, I'd like to start by making a motion, please. I move to approve ordinance 0909, amending Town Code Chapter 7 relating to building and building regulations with the fees as proposed by Red Oak.
All right, I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
All right.
And I have a comment too, please.
All right, Councilmember Dickey,
About
discussion?
the strategic plan. And I wanted to just mention a few of the things, not all of them, that we have, and it was part of what drove our budget. Ensuring development of former state trust land proceeds in a way which is most responsible and beneficial to the community. Maintain and develop good roads and walkways. Optimal use of trails, parks, open space, and reserve service levels, functionality of parks. Promote our small town character with existing and improving and adding to our special events. Enhance customer service. Exercise fiscal responsibility while maintaining organizational functional integrity, and support initiatives which enhance public safety. Almost every one of those is a category that development fees can be applied to. Every dollar that we look at changing this or lowering it or increasing, or decreasing it, all are part of a project that was approved by this council in our capital improvement project. Won't happen. Or if it does, if you say, okay, if it's something like an emergency, a road really needs to be repaired, then something else won't happen. We talked about the senior center with the commission the other day. We talked about an aquatic center. We talked about transportation issues, which are really getting more and more prevalent and needed. We talked about our sports for the arts. What we just talked about, $10,000, which is something, is that something that should make us shiver? No, but it does. Boys and Girls Club, the things that we contract with, the things that make our town what it is. Stormwater, that we're going to have to address, that you mentioned that I don't even think we have that in, but we are certainly spending money on that. And as you have development, as you have blacktop, the stormwater, you turn on your water, you have clean water. There's reasons for that. I guess, and again, we've talked about this a lot, but I want to mention something that was in the paper, in our paper and in the Republic, amazingly today by Rob. And I know if you read him, you realize that he's a fiscally conservative guy. He's not into big government. And he was actually talking about Mesa and saying that he was a little bit put not in support of the cultural fee. So he's not in support of using development fees for the Mesa cultural fee. But almost a throwaway line in there is that he says straight out, impact fees are appropriate to recover infrastructure costs uniquely associated with new developments. That is exactly what this is. It's a valid process. We hired a company that we trusted, that we spent money, resources on to come back with these recommendations. And he is saying straight out that he actually believes in the integrity of development fees to pay somewhat for the cost of the infrastructure that we need for development. In the paper, and I kind of told Mike I would bring this up. I'm not picking a fight, but I didn't understand the stand that they did take on it that says don't raise development fees. They said don't raise it at all. I believe that the paper supported, when we were talking about the $4.5 million to improve Saguaro. And so this is what I don't understand. Why would they support or prefer taxing existing property owners instead of trying to offset some of that with impact fees, which can actually be used as user fees? And again, I get back to the fact that, and Dennis, you mentioned fee, tax, are three little words. Well, they are. And taxes for the roads, for the sanitary district, for the schools, for the preserve. We're talking public safety. We're talking roads. We're talking open space. Those are items that these fees are particularly formed for. So I guess I just don't understand the preference to be taxing us faithful, long-time residents who own homes here in Fountain Hills, as opposed to sharing the burden with those yet to come. One other thing that I want to point out that was in the paper was Diane Brossart, who is the president of Valley Forward, and that's an organization in town that we've interacted with that has a lot of integrity, and obviously they're for growth, they're for good economic engines, but not at the expense of the environment or other quality of life issues. She says, impact fee freezes pose a danger to the frail economy. Most Valley communities are struggling with severe budget cuts, reductions in personnel, and impending tax hikes. They'll take another hit as imposed impact fee freezes on new development go into effect. The moratorium runs counter to the state's legislative priorities, stabilizing an already faltering economy. Growth, even in the soft market, should pay for itself. Elected officials have a responsibility to foresee the consequences of legislation and ensure that they're not placing an even larger burden on cities when they can least afford it. So I ask you to listen to what I'm saying. I understand what the paper said, intuitive. You think you're charging more, your intuition tells you that's going to stop people from coming. There's no evidence of that. There are studies contrary to that, as a matter of fact. So even though it does run counter to the idea, these are just, I'd rather look at facts, I'd rather look at history. No, that's it, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Dickey. Councilmember Brown?
So, thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I don't know, I haven't heard one conversation about the development fee deterring or stopping anybody from building or anybody from moving to town and opening a new commercial office building, or I haven't heard any of that conversation from anybody, and we're about to wear that comment out. And I will say the same thing I've said time and time again, when, as you said, sharing the burden. I agree, we should share the burden. And right now, we aren't sharing the burden, we are taxing the people that we're asking to move to our town. And we aren't helping ourselves at all. And when Fountain Hills starts helping itself a little bit, I will say double them again. But right now, until the town of Fountain Hills helps itself, I think it's ridiculous. We may not, with the amount of building that we saw in 2002 through 2006, we had a huge run for the town. You can look at the numbers and you can compare the numbers. We are anticipating with the fees that's going to continue, and we're going to take these fees and we're going to use them to do the projects that are listed. Well, what happens if we don't build anything in Fountain Hills? And God, I hope that doesn't happen, but if it did happen, how are we going to pay our own way then? And that is the point that I'm trying to drive home. We're assuming that we're going to get a handful of money from development fees, and when we don't get those development fees, how are we going to pay our own way? And that's the point that I've been trying to drive home. And I will say again, I'm not objecting to the development fees. And I've said that every time we've discussed this, but in the same breath, we need to be thinking about paying our own way and not depending so heavily on the development fees to run Fountain Hills. And that's my point. Now, if I had have made the motion, I would have made the motion to eliminate them entirely. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. More comments? Councilmember Vice Mayor Hanson.
Julie, just a clarification. When the study is done for the development fees, are both the CIP and the IIP used in the calculations? It was my understanding when we had the discussion about the IIP last fall. It might have been at the September meeting. And I remember saying that I couldn't support everything in that list that night because there were things in there, like some things that was like, well, this probably will never happen. And the comment was that it's just a wish list of, putting down everything that we might possibly want to do in the town. And so, I mean, even though we made the point that this council has approved the CIP plan, I've always had the concern that we kind of had everything in the world included in that list. and that maybe that was somehow artificially inflating the bottom line numbers that we came up with, because we've included everything that, like Dennis was kind of inferring too, that, might never happen. And so that was just a thought on that.
That's a good thought, and I've got some comments I'll say it to that effect as well, but Julie?
Mayor Slum, Vice Mayor Hanson, the capital improvement plan, the CIP, and the infrastructure improvement plan, the IIP, are one and the same. They're the exact same projects in that report. The difference is that the IIP, the infrastructure improvement plan, includes only those projects or portions thereof that are related to growth. So we start as staff to put together the capital improvement plan, the CIP. Then we sit down with the consultant and we go, okay, let's go through project by project. Is this project related to growth? In other words, are we doing this project because we anticipate new population? And if the answer is yes, then that's a growth-related project. So we may have a wish list item in there, and I can't think for an example, but it may be something that we would do anyway as a community, so it's in the CIP, but it's not included in the calculation of the impact fees because it's not a growth project. So it's eliminated in the calculation of the fees.
Well, there were some things in there. There was like a park in Adaro Canyon. There were the parks in the Elman project, which all along I thought that, Elman had said that they were going to build the parks. But yet that number, which was a pretty significant number, a multi-million-dollar number, was included. And that is growth-related.
Yes, Mayor Slum, Vice Mayor Hanson, I'm going to let Pat Walker handle that one about the Elman project, because that's a little bit different when we have a project in there that the developer is going to do, but it does get included in the calculation of the fee.
Mayor and members of the council, Councilmember Hanson, the Elman property was included because in the Arizona state statute, I'm not going to try to be an attorney, Andrew, but when you're going to give a credit, you have to be able to have the fee in there in the calculation. And so in order to be able to give him that credit where he doesn't have to pay the park fee, then we had to include the cost in there. And one of the things that we do in our study is look at the service level that is being developed for everybody in your community. And that service level target was 2 acres per capita, or per 1,000 people. And so when you include the Elman property in there, you're reaching that service level and people are buying into that service level, so everybody pays. But he will not be paying the impact fee for the dwelling units within that development, because he will get the credit back for a certain amount up to the acreage, and I think it's about 27 acres or something. So it does have to be included in there in order to be able to give it back according to the development agreement.
I know. I'm uncomfortable when we're dealing with numbers and basing it on things that, some things we know will happen for sure, but some things we don't know will happen for sure, but yet we're still including that in the fees.
Excellent. Councilmember Leger?
Vice Mayor, going through the mayor.
Yes, through Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. I share the same concern as well. When you look at a 20-year plan, it's hard to know what we're going to do 5 years from now. But historically, in looking at long-term plans, my experience has been that you may have a project that's slated that may be considered something on a wish list, or a project that may not come to fruition. But usually over a 20-year period, projects are supplanted by other projects. Other needs typically come up, and in the long term, things have a tendency to balance out. I also share your concern and your observation regarding the plan itself. The point I was trying to make is that the numbers come from the capital improvement plan and the infrastructure plan, that we don't just arbitrarily come up with these numbers. And the bottom line is in that regard, there's a choice. The choice is, as we pull the numbers back, if we renegotiate these numbers and pull them back, then we have to recognize we're pulling back capital projects. Or we're increasing the burden to the taxpayers in that regard. So I'm comfortable with your observation, and I struggle with it as well. A 20-year plan is a hard thing to know what in fact will come to fruition. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Dickey?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to address what Dennis said about paying our own way. But again, my understanding of these aren't for paying our own way. Let's take the fire station, for example. If the fees had been higher for the last few years or decade or whatever, we maybe would have had more than the $35,000 that we had for that fire station that we were allowed to take out of development fees. My point being that we wouldn't need another fire station if there's no development. If we didn't have those houses that were going in that area of town, we wouldn't need it. So saying that if the growth stops, then we don't necessarily need everything. But yeah, do we have to fix Saguaro? Yeah, but we were going to, and don't blame the residents that wasn't voted on. It was, the majority of this council decided not to put that on the ballot. But those would have to be the ways that we pay for other infrastructure improvements that need to happen regardless of growth. You could look at the senior center standing alone and saying that that's a wish list, but if there's, 10,000 more people or 5,000 more people in Fountain Hills and we're all getting to the certain age like we were talking the other day, then it will be more than a wish list, or it won't be service anymore. That's what I'm saying. We're going to have to make choices if we don't pay for the growth. So it's the growth. It's not just paying our own way. So that's kind of what I wanted to make that difference with you.
I know. All right. Good dialogue, continued dialogue. Maybe we should just continue this another meeting. Just kidding. We have a motion on the table. Andrew's eyes were rolling, I thought, for a minute there. No, but just to point out the fact that we've had so many public meetings with lots of public input and organizational input and associations and others has been great, because we all know more about impact fees than we probably ever wanted to know. To address the actual study, the report's done, and we talked about this last time, by Red Oak, in this case, a group that follows an industry standard or, process of looking at the capital improvement plan. It's not their fault that it's, $65 million over 20 years or whatever it is, and 180, thank you. Well, yeah, without the growth, yeah. So they follow the standard. We hire them for $65,000 at a time we didn't know about a legislative, the legislature playing in the town's business and city's businesses. We follow the industry standard, hire a company like Red Oak so that we can have fees that we can will hold up, because they follow a protocol that's been generally agreed to. So it's pretty black and white. Obviously, you've got to get, the Red Oak needs to fill in a lot of their questions in order to come up with the math that ultimately they passed along to us. But when you look at the CIP, there are projects in there some of us might not ever envision or want to have completed, but some of those could be supplanted by other projects 10 years from now that would now make sense. So you need to keep that in mind, that everything that's there today, there'll probably be items added 5 years, 10 years from now that will need to be funded. So maybe that's a wash in that respect. But what's not addressed too much is, in the CIP, I don't necessarily have a problem with, because we agreed to it, and we'll probably drill down more on it our next time we review it, but not necessarily will all things in the CIP be funded by, or need to be funded by development fees. So that's the other piece that I look at. If you look at probably in the past, or perhaps before there were in development fees, but if there were at the time, the library or the museum or the community center would have showed up on there as capital items rather than some of the funding that's alluded to here to pay for the debt service. But maybe that would be on there, but that ended up being paid for by bonds, so not through development fees. There are some items in here that we almost put one up for a bond election, the Saguaro Boulevard. No, it doesn't equate to any growth related items in the CIP, because it's really a redo of the street. It's not an improvement. But there are improvements in here that we may go ahead and put forward to the citizens to vote on and have it funded through a different means, like a bond. Or there'll be things that are paid for, as we mentioned, from developers that it's in here just so that we can credit it back through the accounting method. So I took a lot of time, as I know a lot of you have. Is I went through the CIP and did my best with what we know today, and kind of came up with some mathematics to come to, because what I was going to mention first is impact fees are currently a funding mechanism that the town relies upon. They're all just dollars coming in and going out, but they fund things that we budget for every year, that we apply our community's values towards, and we make decisions on a bi-weekly basis here to direct the monies as best we can based on the values of our community. So impact fees are certainly a revenue source that we rely upon today, so I'm not going to ignore that they shouldn't be addressed. So with that in mind, I looked at the current proposal and looked at the CIP and made some reductions in what I thought might ultimately be paid for by impact fees, but might be paid for alternative ways. Maybe some things like the street light or two that may not ever exist. I didn't really remove those, but other things that would have other funding attached to it, because I do agree we need to be responsible to ensure that these CIP items that we've agreed to have a funding source at some point, but I'm confident that some of them will have an alternative funding source. I'm not going to take everything off of the table because I think it's going to get a federal stimulus dollar. We need to be responsible to know that that's not always going to happen. There are things that we added in the capital improvement plan because we specifically are asking for some federal dollars on. So we added some projects to our CIP that weren't on there too long ago. They were pretty substantial. So that increased our CIP that we're now basing our impact fees off. So I took that into consideration also. So I think the dialogue has been well worth it. I think everybody is arguing for the best thing that they feel is good for the community and sits well with them. And then also we have just adopted our vision, so we're really focused on making sure we're competitive in the space of fees. I agree. Development or demand drives development. The fees won't pay too much. It won't really pay too much of a factor, but nobody here wants to charge more than we really have to. We want to charge as little as we have to. I believe that's where everybody's at, and we're all coming at this trying to make the best decision we can, and I appreciate the motion that's been made, but I'd like to make an amendment to the motion, if that's appropriate. Andrew? Make an amendment to the motion that I'll go down through the 5 fee areas, that after I did my calculations that I'll admit are imperfect, but as best I could, to adopt the new fee schedule for single-family residential of $63.80, multifamily residential of $54.04, commercial $6. Now, a couple of these rounded real closely to a flat dollar amount.
Mr. Mayor, do you have them broken down by category, or is it just in lump?
I have
So we know how to
by
address the
category,
ordinance.
as they are presented by staff here.
Okay, on the staff report page?
There were 6 areas.
Okay.
Page 1.
Page 1 of our staff report. Commercial of $6 even. Office of $3 even. Hotel of $2 even. And industrial $2 even. And those 6, 3, 2, and 2 are all per square foot. I took what I could out of the CIP that I expected would be funded likely through an alternative means, and others that, and assume that some projects might be replaced with other projects, and came up with those fees which represent an increase on each fee at a much less substantial rate than was recommended. And that is my amendment of the motion. May I get a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Any discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, what we're going to need to figure out, if you look at the ordinance that was prepared that has the actual fee schedule, we need to somehow equate the gross numbers that you've given us to the actual fees broken down by category.
Okay.
to know how the ordinance could be amended.
All right, let me look at that real quick. Is that section 3, the table there, the fee,
That's correct.
fee table? Thank you. Let me see if I can do that here quickly. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
if you'd like us to, if we could take a few minutes, we could take your total amount and then apply that reduction equally to all the different fee categories and come up with a number that applies to the ordinance so everybody will know exactly what we're voting on.
Okay.
If we could have a moment to do that, I think Pat's got her calculator, we can take a break.
That might work.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Dickey?
Can I ask what projects you eliminated?
Sure. The ones I suspected would be funded through alternative means or, and that had a significant growth portion to them. Like I mentioned, the Saguaro Boulevard one had 0 allocated to growth, so that wouldn't be a good example. Let me look at the one that had the most, which I think were streets. I did also look at the senior center, just as on general government. The capital item for senior center has a portion of it, 37.8% related to growth. That's an example of one that I reduced the commitment towards because I expected that there'll be a large portion that'll be fundraised and or potentially bonded by the folks that would elect it rather than through a capital campaign. I left the, let me look here. The biggest one was the Elman project, as far as I understand how the debiting and crediting. It's page E4 on the E4 on the appendix. It is the community park Elman property. That number, that amount, has been largely eliminated from that because I understand the crediting and debiting, but it needs to show up here. But it ends up not being a dollar that needs to be collected through impact fees. Have to reimburse them.
Mr. Mayor, 2 quick questions.
Yes.
Can we go over the first 2 fees again really quickly, and then we'll address the Elman issue? The single-family residential, you had
$63.80, which is just from the cover page. Recommended fee of $10,459, adopted fee of $63.80.
And then the multifamily residential?
$54.04.
Thank you. Just a clarification on the way the statute works. In terms of infrastructure that's going to be built by a developer that is going to be credited back, if it's not in the fee study, we cannot give a credit back. So for instance, if the cost of the park is $5 million and we've attributed $3 million of that to new growth, $2 million of it is going to be a portion for which could be credited back to the developer because they're building a piece of that infrastructure. But the development fees are never going to add up to that. So there's always going to be a delta that the developer will build and never be reimbursed for. But in order for them to be reimbursed at all, that fee has to be in our fee study. Otherwise, we can't reimburse development fees for a piece of infrastructure that's not in there.
Okay.
So if we reduce it to an amount and the IIP is reduced out so that there is not the park in there anymore, you can't reimburse for construction of that park. And that's what when we talked about earlier, there's a tug of war that the cities and towns find themselves in the middle of. Developers are anxious to have the development fees as high as possible to be reimbursed for large pieces of infrastructure that they build. Well, builders don't want impact fees at all because then they're paying for a cost to reimburse that.
As I mentioned, I'm not removing anything from the CIP.
It's staying in the IIP, but...
I'm looking at how things will ultimately be funded.
Okay, so the
to relate
cost
to what's actually paid for by the right party in essence.
Okay, well, I just want to be clear that
Yeah.
we're not
Clear.
removing the park so that when we get down the road, we don't have a challenge to reimbursement.
Nope, that makes sense. Thank you. So I didn't break it down enough, apparently.
It's just coming down to what you
So-
were there any other projects?
Yes, let me go over a couple more. Thank you. Page F12 of the appendix, which is on, I think this is some of the streets. Yeah, this is the street improvement. Fountain Hills Boulevard widening for $7 million, all equated to growth. That's a portion of which I don't suspect will be paid through, purely through impact fees. I suspect, as we're hoping, that would, one, be paid through a federal dollar that we're asking for currently, or would likely be paid for through a similar means that we discussed with Shea Boulevard, or Saguaro Boulevard, perhaps through a bonding mechanism. So I know it's a balancing act, as we mentioned. Not all of them are going to be, or work out to be the way I'm expecting them to. I just tried to take a swag, in essence, to what I thought would be something that would be fair and a balanced approach. The fire station, for $2 million, that's all equated to growth. There are $2 million of it is equated to growth. I left that in there because obviously that's going to be needed. That may be bonded, but I left that piece in there in my equation. That's a couple of examples. There's no direct science. I thought this, and I didn't, in the end, I also didn't feel like an increase that we were being proposed. It didn't fit quite right with me. Not because of the science that went into it. I just had to look at what increased so much, and it was primarily the streets. And we recently added in some additional streets items because of our desire to win them with federal dollars or stimulus. And in order to actually expend to those, we had to put them in the CIP. And now that CIP, even though the funding is not expected to come from impact fees, still has to be accounted towards our impact fees, and that's what they had to work with. That's how I came up with my dollars. I don't have them broken down enough. I'm not sure if you can extrapolate, because I took the same percentage off of each area. And I know I gave you 6 numbers instead of, looks like about 10 that you want.
And Mr. Mayor, it anticipates the decreases as recommended by the study as well. So the fees that are decreased, you're leaving intact in their total in the amount in the ordinance.
I see what you're
Because
saying.
2 of the fees decrease.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can get a couple minute break, we might be able to get you some numbers for the ordinance.
Or Vice Mayor.
Could you just maybe elaborate a little on how you figured the increase for commercial? Because most of your increases were quite moderate, but that one almost doubled, and that was quite a bit more of an increase than the other ones.
Well, what I didn't necessarily start with what we have. I started substantially with what was proposed because that was based on the new CIP. So based on what we had, didn't make sense. So I for the most part, reduced by a percentage what was proposed. That was generally
Since that one was one.
because that one was
way up
raised so
anyway.
much, it still had a larger increase, but not obviously the increase that was recommended.
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Dickey.
On the amendment, did I just hear that some of these went down?
Some of the items, as it's broken down further on page 77 of our packet, some of the fees did go down when you look at the subsets of
Law enforcement.
and law enforcement. Obviously, the streets is the one that jumped up the most.
And law enforcement and open space both went down. And those decreases, if the ordinance is adopted, will go into effect 75 days from now.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm not following it. So your 2 proposals, 2 of your changes have made our development fees go down. I'm looking at page 77, but I'm not.
Actually, the fee study recommendation made 2 of them go down.
Okay, thank you.
I think those equate to very few dollars, one way or the other one, and even though they're reductions as far as revenue coming in. We have a second. And then I was argued with that I didn't have my amendment. Now we're stalling because Ms. Walker is working hard to fill in the blanks to equal what I intended. And now we are in discussion on hopefully the motion that will work for us. And in fact, the motion will
Mayor,
be amended again because it needs to equate to the table.
I just want
Councilmember
to speak to
Dickey.
the amendment, the rationale for it being that trying to lessen the amount that it is going up from what it was. The amounts that were originally proposed through another exercise like this that we paid for the study, the legitimate study, and the fees that were accepted at the time were low and arbitrary, and now we're making decisions on changing these based on the fact that it's a certain percentage over than what it is. I just don't understand the rationale. We're getting these numbers for a rational reason, but we're saying we don't want to do it because it's twice the amount it is now.
I'm going to try to make, I understand. And what we're looking at from Red Oak is assuming that there's no more bonding on these items. There's no more federal stimulus on these items. And that's the right assumption. You need to be conservative, that if we are to build everything that we want, which is in alignment with what the council values and we think that the citizens desire, we need to figure out a way to pay for these. And one way is to ensure that growth pays for itself. If it were not for growth, we wouldn't do this project or this portion of that project. So how do you equitably charge somebody moving into our town that's going to benefit from these improvements and also brings the burden of those improvements? How do you charge them for that so that we're all, paying our fair share? That all I agree with. That's in here. What I don't agree with is how it's funded. Like I was saying with the Saguaro Boulevard, not that that's an example of growth, but that was an area we would bring out for a bond and potentially have the public pay for that CIP item through a bond rather than through an impact fee. Another area might be the senior center.
But to that point, Mayor, the senior center may not be needed unless we have a lot of extra people living here, but everybody who lives here now will have to pay for that bond. It is creating a burden for existing residents to pay for needs for residents to come. We are favorably treating people that aren't here yet and giving the burden to those of us who are and who have been the whole time.
Well, I'm just...
So the rationale is what's really escaping.
I understand. The senior center, for example, is 37.8% equated towards growth, and that's the piece that I'm saying I'm saying for purposes of equating an impact fee, it would be impacted or affected by potentially being funded in a different way. That's maybe not the best example here. A downtown parking garage is one, that developers would be 37.8% of. Perhaps that would be funded through something else. Maybe a developer comes and builds, downtown, and part of what they do is to help build a parking structure. The pool, a community park, some big dollar items that add up to $6 million, $7 million are items that we might not necessarily pay for just through our capital improvement dollars, but would choose to go through some alternative funding like a bond or grants. An example of which would be more recently, like Desert Vista Park was previously on our plan for $2 million round figured. It still remained on our CIP because we spent that money, but $1 million of it was funded through a grant. So if we collected $2 million in impact fees, that really wasn't the right amount to charge because half of it potentially was paid through a grant. Now I know these things all move and it equates into the right.
We don't collect the whole amount.
Right. It equates into the right to what's correct. So I don't have a problem with CIP. It's just other funding comes into how it's paid, and I don't know if we put it all on impact fees. Were you able to work my calculation?
What we've done is percentages
Yeah.
based on each one, and then we'll have those same percentages that you adopt to each of the categories. There's going to be more calculations. We've got one more to do. And then
Okay, thank you. I thought I just had to address that first page. I'm sorry. Councilmember Archambault.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to address the motion. Clearly, I understand the frustration that some of the council members have expressed up here tonight. It's a frustration I think every one of us feels. Nobody wants to pay more than it costs for the services, but they do expect to pay something. The frustration we've had as a council is we put things in front of the citizens and they tell us, no, they don't want to pay for that. And it's frustrating. But then they get to deal with the services they get because they told us that's what they're willing to accept. When the council takes a position to not put something on the ballot because they say the citizens probably won't pass it, and we've heard different arguments back and forth, we're assuming that they're not going to pass it. Maybe they won't. And if they wouldn't pass the bonding for Saguaro Boulevard, then they get to live with Fountain Hills Boulevard. But they also get to live with the ramifications, which would be Fountain Hills Boulevard falling apart, potholes, and maneuvering from one lane to the other to avoid them. But I think that the citizens in this town do expect to pay for something. I don't know where that level is right now, but I do know that they expect to pay for something. And they expect us to spend the money that we do get wisely. I think that what I'm struggling with is you're essentially reducing about $9.5 million out of the IIP CIP projects. And I did a wild educated guess also, and came up with just a simple formula. If for each dollar reduce each fee, how much does it take out of just the street budget? It would be about $9 million is what you're proposing. And in fact, I almost came up with the exact same number as I was going through your calculations, so I could see you were taking some large numbers out of there, and maybe rightfully so. But when I hear the word, well, we could bond for this, or we might get stimulus money for that, we can't make that assumption. And in doing so, we're either sacrificing the unsustainable revenues of this town by bonding it with our sales tax revenue, or going to the citizens and saying, we need a bond to build a senior center. Now, clearly, I think if we want to talk about the senior center, that we probably will bond for part of that senior center. But with the impact fees that we get in, they help supplement the cost of that senior center, and so we're bonding less. And then the citizens overall pay a fair share to enjoy that senior center. It's kind of like what we did here with Town Hall. We didn't go to the citizens and say, will you bond and will you give us the money to build Town Hall? However, we had the impact fees that we'd collected to help pay for this Town Hall, and the move that the council made at that time was important because it was going to save us $500,000 a year. Was it the right move? Oh, heck yes, because we're paying less than that for the bonds that we have out there for this town hall. So in a roundabout way, we gave the citizens in this town a gift. Now sometimes they get frustrated because we give them a gift, we show them how prudent we are, we explain to them what we're doing, we're open, they can find anything that they want on our website, and if they can't find it there, they certainly can contact one of us. And it's frustrating when you demonstrate to the citizens that we are an open government. We don't fall into that trap that everybody likes to put government into. And nobody wants to pay any more than what they want, than what they have to. But they do expect services. When you reduce those services, then all of a sudden they realize the impact of their ballot. So in a roundabout way, listening to your discussions, it's like we're going to go back and say, well, we're either going to balance those capital projects or infrastructure improvements on the town's coffers or the citizens. And it's, to collect the impact fees that we paid $65,000 to have the study done on. We have the data. It's hard data. It's not suggestive. They don't just pluck the number out of the air. There there's projects that are going to come up, probably in the next 5 years, and other projects may go away. But if we don't collect the fees now, we won't have the money for those projects, and we're slowly strangling this down to death. Now, I'm trying to stay focused on just the just the impact fees. I could get into a whole nother discussion about the citizens in the town and how the services they demand of this town and what they're willing to pay. You know, they complain when we raise a fee $2 or $3, or they complain about a permit number, but yet it's what the citizens elected to do when they formed the town. They elected to control their destiny, control their own infrastructure, control their own town. And in doing so, they have to realize that the town's a zero-based enterprise. We don't make a profit on anything. We don't collect more than what we need, and we always have more pressures on desires than we have money for. So there's certainly a lot of wants out there, and I could probably name a few, but I won't delay this any further. But we cannot, in my good conscience, I cannot take the path that's unsustainable. We've given too much away in hopes of development. We cannot continue down the path where neither citizen, builders, developers, nor businesses wish to pay their fair share. And quite frankly, it's just not fair. The town's coffers are not for anyone to dip their hands into. The revenues are for the services of the stakeholders and not outside interests. Now, I don't like paying fees any more than anybody else does, but I'm certainly willing to pay my fair share. I got my property taxes in last week. I know the county's hurting. I know the state's hurting. I wrote a check for the whole amount, send it in and say, there. I know what's left in that account is mine. Don't bother me again. I gave my fair share. So, thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Leger.
Hey, Julie, could I tear you away from that wonderful calculator I lent you? Do you happen to have that slide that we looked at in our last session that goes back to 2002 and looked at what was proposed and what was adopted? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, the different breakdowns of what was proposed, what we adopted over the years.
Could you go through that for us?
If I can find it.
Yeah. My point in going back there is that this was an exercise that I think we had a council person come before us this evening that went through that exercise and had fond memories of that exercise, where once again they engaged in an arbitrary discussion, set fees significantly low, and significant revenue was not realized by the town as a result of that. Now, when we started this argument some time ago, I made a comment that, okay, development fees, we're looking at them, impact fees, we're taking a look at them. I think it's time to look at some adjustments, and that's what we're doing here. And I must say the high end of the scale here that we have before us, I'm very reasonable and flexible with respect to the capital improvement plan and some of the things in there that may never come to fruition. However, I'm real concerned about the numbers that have been put on the table this evening. For example, if I wrote down your numbers correctly, we're increasing industrial by 2 cents. 2 cents a square foot. We're increasing hotels by 39 cents a square foot. Office by 65 cents. Commercial, well, that one seems a little more reasonable. That's $2.79, so forth and so on. I feel that because previous councils perhaps didn't have the political will to make a decision, we're kind of in catch-up mode, and we're falling into the same scenario. I've heard this evening that the town, not the growth part of the town, needs to pay their fair share. Let's look at our capital improvement plan. It's $180 million. The residents existing in the town coffers will be paying $120 million of that. The 60 million, which represents about 30%, we're looking towards for developers that are coming to this town. Julie, you did an analysis for us and stated that if we stayed at our current rate and then we moved up to the recommended rate, if we did not go with the recommended rate, that we would, in revenue, diminish our revenues, and you said conservatively, by 10, 11, 12 million dollars. My quick little calculations that the increases we're looking at here amount to less than 10%. I mean, it's almost an exercise in futility. That 10% applied to that 11, 12 million dollars says that we will have $10 million less in revenue than we would realize if we were going to the high end. But the low end is I think, extremely unrealistic. I've done the analysis. I've looked at the capital improvement plan. I've looked at things that should stay, things that should go, things that may occur, things that may not. And this isn't scientific either, but I kind of looked at where we were, what our consultant is proposing, and where we neglected to make increases several years ago, and we paid the piper for that, big time. I mean, to me, if you want to start pushing numbers back, if you take where we're at in the high end and you come up with an average, at least that gives you a bit of a more realistic number. And I'll just make one specific comment in that regard. I have heard that we must not increase our development fees because it will have an adverse effect on the Swaback project, where everyone's excited about the Swaback project. If you look at the critical elements of the Swaback project, one of the critical elements was sidewalks, another one was traffic mitigation, another one was improvements in streets, another one was a performing arts center, another one was a parking garage. Guess what, folks? All of those things are in the capital improvement plan. And we're asking commercial developers to pay a certain portion of that to contribute to the vision. So I don't think that increasing the impact fees is going to adversely affect the vision. One more point I'd like to make. Everyone in this room, and perhaps a lot of people that may be viewing this at some point in time, may recall our discussion about the 13 acres that remain vacant. I know that Ms. Yates, that was up here this evening, looked at that 13 acres for many years and probably wanted to go prune weeds off of it, for goodness sakes. We had a developer that stepped up. We worked through that whole process. That developer, I have the development agreement right in front of me here, that developer, total project was 450,000 square feet of development, of which 200 square feet was commercial. When we start looking at large projects and the type of projects that we've been looking at the Swaback group, and I haven't heard Swaback push that back on impact or development fees, frankly, nor have I heard Elman push back on development or impact fees. But I think there's another variable we need to look at here. We're saying to ourselves, we don't want our commercial fees to be so high to discourage development. There's no evidence of that, but let's say I agree with that because it sounds like a fundamentally sound argument. I have in front of me a development agreement with the developer that was willing to develop 400,000 square feet, 200,000 square feet of commercial, whereby the town, through a development agreement, capped the development fees. So what I'm simply saying is that there are many tools to manage the fees at a higher level. And you don't have that same incentive to be able to provide developers. I've heard an awful lot about the Swaback project in many meetings, and I've been involved in them. What we need to do is incent the developer. Well, folks, look at reality. The state legislature has taken away just about every tax incentive you can give a developer. Impact fees allows a reasonable number for the small projects and allows you the flexibility to, if you may, cap or negotiate and come up with some sort of incentive. At the rates we're proposing here, these numbers aren't going to pay for the type of infrastructure that will support those projects, and it will be a very cold day in this town before the citizens, I believe, and this is not to be disrespectful, step up for a bond for a parking garage, step up for a bond for a performing arts center, step up for a bond for an amphitheater, and I'll go on and on and on. And I know that to be true because we just had an election not too long ago where 80% of the folks said they don't want to pay, they didn't want to pay for services, fire, and police services. Although the primary couldn't dedicate it, our resolution had it dedicated to that. So I just think that I'm more than happy to pull these numbers down from the top for all the reasons that you've mentioned. I think that you did an excellent exercise. I think you're just way off the scale. Way off the scale.
Let me just give a couple of things in my quick calculations today.
2 cents for industrial?
That may have been a mistake.
Yeah.
That one may have been a calculation
And
error.
if you are going
But
to
it should have been closer to 28% increase.
If you're going to do 2 cents,
let me
do
just-
me a favor, keep it where it's
Yeah,
at.
no,
So
let me give a couple of things on single-family residential. Single-family residential, these are not new numbers to work with, but just an idea of where the increases were. Single-family residential ended up being, if we adopt what I had, about a 16.5% increase. Multifamily residential at 10% increase. Why it's not the same percent increase is because I based it off of what was proposed, of course. Commercial ends up, even though it's far below what was recommended, it still is an 80% increase in the square footage fee. Office is a 28% increase, hotels 25% increase. So these are all still, if you were looking at comparing what we did a couple of years ago with what we're doing now, it's still a substantial increase. It still may not get everyone up to the level they're comfortable with, but those are what those increases equated to as far as a percentage from what they are currently. 16.5%, 10%, 80%, 28, and 25, and the industrial will be about 20%. But I appreciate what you're saying. I just did the best I could looking at where I thought alternative funding would come from outside of the impact fees. I'm comfortable with the CIP as it is today, and so we discuss it at another meeting in the future. So I'm not looking at removing items from the CIP, but just simply address how some of them might be funded.
Yeah.
Councilmember Dickey.
Again, I have a problem with this percentage as a rationale because the numbers that exist were absolutely arbitrary. They weren't based in anything. So by saying it's a substantial amount higher, it's kind of it doesn't really mean anything. It's not related to the reality of what was needed at the time. And if this moratorium goes through, we're not going to see these until 2011. So this is going to be even less adequate at that time if we have to wait that long for them to go through. So if we go with that assumption. The other thing, I never really quite understood why we don't ever have Scottsdale's numbers here, because if you're worried about people deciding whether to come here because of impact fees, I would think Scottsdale would be one of the more logical places to look, and we've never been able to see what that is. I remember you told us once, but I don't remember why.
Mayor and members of the council, Scottsdale doesn't have non-utility impact fees. They have used other funding sources in the past. However, based on the fact that there's not construction sales tax coming in, they're not going to have that funding source. So what that means is that they took away money from other things within the community that they could have used construction sales tax for and used that for impact fee projects.
but that doesn't mean that that's what they're going to be able to do for the future because of the economic downturn, but they just have utility impact fees.
But they have utility, you see, and they have property tax, and there are things that other towns have that we do not have.
Correct. I just looked at what are we expecting impact fees to fund? What do I think is more realistic as far as the funding source? And tried to apply that to the math. I wasn't comfortable with what was proposed, not because it wasn't the right mathematics, but it was because I don't expect all those projects to be paid for through impact fees, or at least the growth portion through impact fees. Example would be the Swarrow Boulevard one that we will likely come to the public next year on as a bond, as we learn to deal with the pain of paying for street improvements and maintenance on that one. Did I really put you in the corner with my calculations?
Mayor, members of the council, I just heard that one of the percentages might change, which would change, overall. What we had done is calculated based on the numbers you gave us what the decrease would be on each of the categories. And then as a percentage, and you apply that across the board, like you take residential, if the decrease was $4,079, then that's like 38.9%, and you apply that towards each of the fee categories and you can come up to that dollar amount, or the difference in the dollar amount. But I just heard a different percentage, so I'm not sure what the percentages are. We had calculated them out, but you're changing the industrial one then?
Yes,
Okay.
to 20% increase.
You mean you're looking at an increase, not a decrease from the proposed, you're looking at an increase from the current?
Increase from the current, decrease from the proposed.
If you could just
Okay?
walk down that percentage.
Yep, let me figure out the dollar amount on this one.
Andrew? Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Dickey.
Andrew, what would be, I made the main motion and there's an amendment on the floor. What if someone was to propose an amendment that would just, bless you, take the proposed amounts and lower them by 10% or something like that?
The motion that's currently on the floor is the mayor's motion.
The amendment?
Yeah, that amendment needs to be voted up or down one way or the other.
Okay.
But before we do have a vote on it, we definitely want to clarify what the motion is so that we'll have specific
It will
direction.
now will have to be really undone because we don't have it in the right format for the tables, correct?
Right. Well, what we need from any motion that happens is a clear direction on how to go and fix the ordinance that has all the actual fee categories broken down rather than the conglomeration that's in the staff report.
That fee industrial, based on the cover here, would be now $2.38 instead of the $3.11 recommended and up from the current $1.98.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can recap, then you have a total single-family residential at $63.80. You have a multifamily residential at $54.04. You have a commercial at $6. You have office at $3. You have hotel at $2 and industrial at $2.38.
Yes.
Okay. If the way I would recommend that you word the motion to allow staff flexibility after the meeting's over and before the ordinance is actually executed is that you have the motion read or mean as follows, that you're amending the main motion to modify the recommendation of the fee increases as follows, and then we have the list that I just listed with the reductions applied to all respective fees included therein based upon a weighted average. That way we can go through and apply to each category that is included in that total fee that you've amended in the staff report.
And be a recommendation of reduction against the recommended fee.
It would just be a recommended adopted fee of those
Okay,
numbers.
okay.
Right. Not a reduction or an increase, it's just, that's what the fee would be.
Okay, Councilmember Leger.
In theory, if we move in this direction, there's a question I have that I think I would need to have answered, and I think the public needs to have answered, which is, given these adjustments and given these numbers that we're coming up to, what does that do to our capital improvement plan? I have no idea. We're changing it. In some cases, we may be decimating it, and I have no idea. I mean, it almost appears to me that we would have to take these numbers and apply them to our analysis and come back and say, this is what you have, folks. This is what you had at this price. This is what you have at this price. And to totally decimate our capital improvement plan after a year of discussion and approval in this manner, I don't feel comfortable with it. As I said earlier, I've been more than happy to move off the high numbers here, but because of the size of the decreases, which perhaps I could feel comfortable with, but I need to know what it's doing to our capital improvement plan. And yes, Julie, if you could address that, please. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor Slum, Councilmember Leger, the capital improvement plan won't change. What will change...
The growth portion, excuse me.
The growth portion still won't change because that is the adopted plan. What will change is that the general fund or the other funds will have to somehow pay for the capital projects. There just won't be the sufficient money. It will have to be funded through other sources.
And Mayor, if I may, and you're articulating that more as a finance director would articulate, but it really comes to the same conclusion that we know that money's not going to be there in the capital fund because we're not going to have those types of surpluses in the general fund which push over into the capital fund. So the end result to me is still the same. Things just don't get done.
Mayor Slum, Councilman Leger, you're correct. They would get pushed out and pushed out.
And where does that burden get pushed to if those things become necessities when our infrastructure starts failing? Onto the taxpayers as a tax in a town that doesn't particularly historically approve taxes, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but it's just history.
I just want to point out the comments are pretty extreme. They're like all or nothing. And what we're talking is about the growth portion, which is a smaller portion of the overall capital improvement plan. And it's not removing it, it's still increasing the fee. So it's not decimating anything. It's simply applying a percentage, an increase to the impact fees based on my going through and calculating how I might suspect funding might ultimately pay for such improvements, particularly on the growth side. Still, the majority of the capital improvement items are not paid out of impact fees. It wouldn't necessarily decimate it. I don't want to. But there's a greater argument amongst the anxiety that I sense is around funding for our community and the sustainability of such. I think that's another argument that this is part of it, and I think I wanted to try to come up with a number that I thought was, again, that fair, that balanced, and having the growth pay for itself. But there are projects on there that I talked about that we're expecting, perhaps we may not do unless we receive funding from an alternative method, not necessarily an impact fee, such as the widening of Fountain Hills Boulevard, part of the SHAPE project. We're hoping the fire station is an example project maybe some of us aren't comfortable funding with today unless we get alternative funding for it. I don't want to open up a can of worms there, Councilor Dickey, but I'm trying to come up with examples.
Mayor,
Yes,
I appreciate that. When I was saying capital, we've talked about growth so much, I meant the growth portion. And as I stated, you've had the benefit of going through your analysis,
right,
which I appreciate, and you have had the benefit of knowing how it will impact the plan, and I simply don't have that knowledge nor that comfort level because I haven't had the benefit. So what I'm simply suggesting is it would be instructive to take a look at the rates that you're proposing and what our plan then looks like on the growth side. That's all I'm saying, because I don't know, frankly, I'm having a hard time connecting the dots here.
Okay. Councilmember Hanson.
since
Vice
it
Mayor.
appears that this is causing considerable consternation at this point, and that it does open up additional questions, as Henry mentioned. I know Dennis was facetious before when he made, about continuing this, but that might be something that we do want to consider, at least until the next meeting. We have staff, getting this at the last minute, trying to scramble around and come up with what the final version would look like and feel like and what the impact would be. And the suggestions might be really good, but I think probably there's a number of us on the dais that would like more time now to consider what the changes mean. Some of us may have been totally opposed to this, ahead of this. Now maybe with reductions would consider it, but I think it would be more fair to give us a little bit more time to now go, wow, this is really a different picture, and what does it really mean? And I guess with that, I would make a motion to continue until the next meeting.
Knowing you understand Robert's rules probably better than anyone. That's probably the right process.
Takes precedence
Thank you.
over the motions on the floor.
Appreciate it.
But it does need a second.
Do we have a second? All right, any discussion on the motion to continue? Would we continue to our next meeting, is what was mentioned?
I think,
All right.
Mayor? Oh,
Yes. Comment?
I would suggest continuing it to, and we have some time to agendize for the next council meeting. I'm not quite sure how much time it's going to take for staff to make the adjustments, and I'd like them to have the time, and I'd like them to have this right so we can move on this, and if that means the next meeting, the meeting after. We're in the midst of a 2-year moratorium anyhow, so we are collecting impact fees at our current rate, and that doesn't change. So I don't know, maybe we could ask our consultant or Julie how much time it would take for them to deliver a revised product to us for our review.
Julie, what do you suspect is needed given what you know?
Mayor, some council members, if I understand, what you would want us to bring back is a new fee schedule based on what has been proposed tonight as far as those fees, and break them all up between the categories. If that's basically it, that's not a difficult task. We could do that. I'm assuming you don't want us to go back and do a whole new study or go back and look at and recalculate the fees based on the study. I'm assuming that's not what we're asking for, because that's probably several months.
Councilmember Leger.
In addition to that, as I mentioned before, I'd like to know what impact this has on the growth portion of the previous analysis.
Mayor, if I may, since the motion, we're only supposed to be discussing the merits of the motion to continue. So what if I rephrase that, and rather than saying the motion to continue until the next meeting, until such time as staff feels they are prepared to bring the information forward? Can I do that? Thank you.
And do we need a second of that one?
I was just modifying, so
Thank
if
you.
Henry agrees with that.
Second that?
Second.
All right,
Yeah.
discussion on that motion to continue.
To the motion of continuing, how much staff time is going to be spent on this? How many resources are going to be spent on this? Will our consultant have to charge us extra for any extra work for her time here, for anything she does between now and when this comes back up? And how much have we already done by waiting since the spring, then July, then, let's see, August and September?
I don't know if we have all those answers. If you could speak to
Spend
your
resources
time.
by continuing this item.
Do you want me to? Mayor and members of the council, if I can, and Andrew, stop me if I'm hitting on a topic I'm not supposed to. If you want to know what the impact are going to be on projects, what you would have to do is run the new cash flow analysis and determine how much cash you won't have as a reduction of the fees over the life of the study. You would have to look at what that dollar amount is and then determine what projects you wouldn't be able to do by that dollar amount. So that would take extra work, and we have the model to run that, but it would be extra consultant fees to do that because our contract's been extended. But, Julie? Thank you.
So if we were to suggest, or you come up with an A and a B option at our next meeting, utilizing perhaps what I suggested in our motion, is this still relevant to talk to on the motion, to understand
The
the
merits of the motion to continue.
merits of the motion to continue? The, based on the fact that it's largely a reduction in by percentage, evenly across the recommended fees, to illustrate an option A and an option B for us to consider, so we don't have to continue it once again to come up with an option C, potentially.
Mr. Mayor, I think that the current motion to continue to a time when we're comfortable to be able to provide you with a recommendation will give the staff sufficient time to be able to speak with the council members individually about what would be necessary in order to make the decision, so that the next time we show up here, everybody has as much information as necessary, whatever that is.
I agree. It certainly will take more resources and more dollars to address this. All right, any other comments on the motion to continue? Are you going to comment, Councilmember Shambo?
No.
Okay.
I have a question.
No, Councilmember Dickey.
In talking about the motion to continue, which was asked because we feel we didn't have good information on what would be missing, is it proper to ask Julie, if we said there's $138 million in projects, $60 million we were expecting to get from this, now there'll only be a certain amount, can she give us that?
I believe that based upon the discussion, whatever information we're able to do prior to actually re-engaging the consultant to rerun the models will be brought before you with the intent that if it is going to require further analysis and that doesn't bring you to a level of comfort at the next meeting, that we would then come back and talk about the consultant's contract with you prior to bringing back the study for further analysis. Because I think that if we get to the point where we don't feel like you're all comfortable with the information we can provide without going back out to rerun it, then I think that our next step will be to come back and ask you to amend their contract in order to figure out how much more it will cost to run the model to get you the information you need.
Mayor, I guess that's because I'm saying we could probably get that number right now. Just one number. These are our capital improvement plans. This is what we expect with this amount. I mean, just, you know, we don't have to do it by categories. Just say, okay, now it'll only be 50 million. Is that good for you? You know, is that enough information to make the decision tonight? Because we're not going to eliminate projects by name. I say I don't know what I can talk about because we're only talking about the continuing, so I don't know what to say, you know, that's allowable.
Thank you.
I don't want to continue it. I could talk
I think
to it.
we could do perhaps what you're saying, but I think so much discussion's gone on that we need to make sure everybody is more comfortable with it through a continuation. Councilmember Shambo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to speak to the motion that's on the floor. I'm going to oppose the motion to continue only because I've spent an exorbitant amount of time on this particular issue. Last council meeting, I went through a long discussion about the odyssey that I walked through, and I did exactly what you tried to do tonight. Is I tried to reduce those numbers. I tried to say what is fair, what isn't fair. I looked at those capital improvement projects. I knew we were going to have to reimburse Elman for those parks. That's what we needed to collect the money. And if we don't collect those monies, it's just going to come out of the town coffers. You heard Julie talk about that. You know, we have to come up with the money somewhere to supplement it. You know, I just have trouble, you know, spending so much energy and time on this particular subject when we have professionals in front of us that have come up with that number. I'm not comfortable that even if we come back at the next time, that the council is even going to agree on that number, that one may get fudged, and we may be going back out and coming back at a different time. And it's like I'm sitting up here, it's like a slow death. And I'm beginning to think, maybe I should just put a plastic bag over my head and just be done with it.
That's only because you care so much, Councilmember.
Thank you, Mayor.
Like everybody else up here, I'll fall on the sword here thinking that I understood the 6 columns, the 6 boxes to fill in and overlooked the, several others. So, but I do understand that, the methodology I followed is not simple, and it addresses so many different capital items that everybody might not be comfortable with it. So, we can, continue this as was discussed, and then I will work with staff and work to also do some additional work and get it into the report, the staff report, so that it can be studied for a week or so before our next council meeting, and chat with staff so they have an understanding of where it's coming from, and then you can chat with them about so you understand what's coming forward more thoroughly. This is maybe the longest drawn-out discussion over several meetings on a fee that we cannot charge due to a moratorium, but we'll get there, and I think the next meeting will go much more smoothly on this item. So, call for the question to continue. Roll call on that, please.
Councilmember Leger?
Aye.
Councilmember Brown?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hanson?
Aye.
Mayor Schlum?
Aye.
Councilmember Dickey?
No.
Councilmember Cantino?
Aye.
Councilmember Ashambo?
Nay.
Mayor 5-2.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you,
Next
staff.
item.
Next item on the agenda, council discussion direction to town manager. Rick? Anything on this item? I see nothing. Summary of council requests and report on recent activities by town manager. Any updates?
Some of the more, Mayor, Council, some of the more exciting things that happened this week. We played host to 2 very prominent land developers in Fountain Hills. The mayor was part of that, and we're able to share our downtown vision with them. And it was very exciting meetings, and I think they were very impressed not only with the planning but with the appearance of the community, and I think saw the possibilities that could be here in our downtown area. So we continue to make contacts. There's a possible of a third visit in the future, but to have these 2 contacts so soon after developing that vision adds some credence to the idea that this is going to be, in the future, a very key instrument for our community as we seek to realize economic development.
All right, thank you. I know we thought a lot about development fees, but our focus is always on fun here as well. And we had a great time at the homecoming parade. That was just awesome. Appreciate all the volunteers that put that on and staff that worked to help coordinate that, and Sheriff's Office for keeping us all safe there. It was just an awesome event, and now we've got homecoming, of course, Friday night. And prior to our parade, we had a great work by everybody, and the volunteers and staff is included on the ballet End with the Stars, and Oktoberfest was just a great time and tremendous turnout. It seems like things continue to improve on that. So I thought I'd just recap with trying to focus on some of the great things that we've experienced lately. And don't miss tailgating as well just before the game on Friday there at the park next to the field. So that's all I wanted to mention. Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Apologize this item didn't go smoothly, but look now for a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
And a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.